After we talk about entity, it is time for us to look into the relationship to complete the ER diagram design. The original design that we have done from entity is of course not completed. We need to refine the initial design by introducing the relationship, which means that we would able to connect tables together through our relationships. So in ER diagram, obviously by the name, is composed of entity and relationship. The entity consists of entities as well as the attributes. Those are the different attributes we discuss in the entity. And what we need to know, the third component in the ER model is of course the relationships and their relationship type and relationship sets. So we will introduce some terminologies here. For the relationship type, indicating the design of the ER diagram. So it is a schema description of a relationship. Identifies the relationship name and the participating entity types. It also identifies certain relationship constraints. So the schema here, relationship type, is the design that we want to say, for example, connects employee and department through a relationship called works for. Because in our company database, every employee must work for a department. So this is like the design of the ER diagram. So this is a schema description. As to employee number 1 work for research department, employee number 2 works for administration department, those kind of instances are considered as relationship set, which means the current set of relationship instances. So those are the real examples, real people, or real conceptual definitions exists over there for the relationship. So the current state of the relationship type indicating what is it that who works for what department as an example. So if we take a look of this picture clearly defines the schema over here. This is the schema that we are looking at. Employee manages department as another example. So you can see that we connect the employee and department through the manager's relationship, indicating who is manager of what department. So that is what we call the relationship type, which is the schema, the design that we want to capture. In ER diagram, this is all we care about, relationship type or the schema. As to the real instances, those are the data that we try to store. And of course, employee can change the departments that they manage for all the time. So for the relationship set, it changes frequently. Unlike schema design, they usually don't change because we need to keep track of this information. In ER diagram, we represent the relationship as the following things. To describe a relationship in ER diagram, we draw a diamond shaped box that connects the participating entities. And therefore, when we use a diamond shape connects two entities, that indicating the two things has a relationship. Consider the relationship type work for, indicating who works for what department, between the two entities, employee and department. Each relationship instances in the relation set associate one employee entity and one department entity. So if you take a look of this one, you will see that indicating employee works for which department. On the other example, employee manages what department in here. And therefore, you can see that we have a diamond shape indicating that employee and department has a relationship called works for. Employee and department has another relationship called manages. They are describing different things, so they have different meanings over there. Of course, you may have already noticed that we use double line over here, use a single line over here, we use one and n to represent some other information. And of course, those are the things I want to continue for the discussion. But at this moment, I want you to understand that we use a diamond shape indicating that there is a relationship between employee as well as the department tables. Sometimes if we want to describe each employee must work for one department. So you can see that there are some important terminologies over here. One terminology is the must here. Works for exactly one department. So you can see that there are two emphases in this sentence. One is saying must. I can tell you the must indicating you use double line over there, saying that all of the people have to have this relationship. Works for exactly one department, that's where that one comes from. So these are the two important constraints to describe the relationship we want to discuss over here. So the first thing is what we call the cardinal ratio. Cardinal ratio for a binary relationship specifies the maximum number of relationship instances that an entity can participate in. For example, if you are looking at the works for relationship, department to the employee is indicating that it's a cardinal ratio of 1 to n, indicating each department must relate it to several employees, but every employee can only work for one department. This is where we can understand that cardinal ratio examples over here. So seeing that employee and department has a relationship called works for, to describe that employee must work for one department. So you can see that we have a one over here, indicating that employee works for one department, specify the implementation of one. On the other hand, if we look into the next slide to look into the reverse direction, you can see that department has several employees works for them. You can see that if I put a 1 over there, that will specify that every department has only one employee works for them. It's obviously not going to be correct. So this is the kind of information that we need to keep track of. If we look into the second examples that I have prepared over here, you can see that employee and department has another relationship called managers. Specify who is the manager. So you can see in this definition, department has one manager. So this is the one that we try to represent. Every employee manages one department over here. So you can see that this one indicating if this employee is a manager, then that manages one department. So you cannot manage several departments in this design. By looking into these examples, you now can probably already guess what's the meaning of the single line and double line. So remember, in the sentences that we describe over here, employee must, so we put a double line over here, employee must work for one department. So that's what this double line trying to say. On the other side, department must have several employees work for them. Manager, since not every employee is a manager, you can see we put a single line over here. So a single line indicating not every employee participate in this relationship. So to describe the whole thing over here, you can see that the manager may manages one department. So this one still stands over there. If that employee is a manager, he manages only one department. So this is the combination of the two constraints that we're going to put together. You can see that this is exactly what I've said. Each manager manages one department if he participates in this relationship, but not everyone participates. While we change this one into n, that is changing the definition of this managers. So each managers can manage many departments if we put an n over here. So that is what we try to understand in the constraints for the cardinal ratio. So cardinal ratio has only 4 different kind of combination. It can be 1 to 1, it can be 1 to n, or n to 1. So basically 1 to n and n to 1 are the same thing. It depends on how you're going to see the order. The next one is the m to n relationship. This is the most complicated one, so that we will discuss this in the next example as well. So for example, manager's relationship for a one-to-one, indicating that you can only manage one department and every department has only one manager. M to N is an employee can work on several projects. So every employee can work on several projects and every project can work by several employees. And therefore, this is the best example to describing the M to N relationship. So if we look into this figure, you can see the schema over here is indicating employee has a relationship, works on the projects. Since employee can work on several projects, employee 1 work on only one project. It's easy to understand. Employee 2 works on project 1 and project 4. On the other side, project 1 is worked by employee number 1 and employee number 2. And therefore, you can see that this gives you a good understanding of what is a M to N relationship. After we look into the cardinal ratio, the next one is what we call a total and partial constraint, which is the one that I have described to you guys, a single line or a double line. So let's look into this part officially. The participation constraints specify whether the existence of an entity depends on its being related to another entity via the relationship. In other words, does this entity have to participate in this relationship? If yes, it is a total constraint, which we will put a double line. If no, we put a single line over here. Just like the managers, not everyone is a manager, so we will do a single line over there. For example, if a company policy states that every employee must work for a department, then you will have to put a double line over there. Since not every employee is a manager, so the relationship is partial. And therefore, you can see this is why we have this double line over here. This is describing by employee must work for one department, and not every employee is a manager. And that's why we explain this double line and this single line. You can notice one thing. On the other side, that requires some common sense for the design. In this double line indicating every department must have some employees, this is a common sense. We did not have a word to describe this one, and you need to use your judgment to design single line or double line. You have to know one thing. Design is an art. It does not have a perfect answer. As long as you can explain why you think it has to be a single line or it has to be a double line, as long as you have some reasons, that is justifiable. On the other side, department must have a manager. That's what this relationship tries to say. And therefore, you have to have someone that manages the department, so that we put a double line over here. And therefore, you can see that that is what I have described by showing you a picture indicating what we try to represent in this single line and double line. To summarize the two constraints, cardinal ratio, we have some choices. There's actually not many choices. It's either a 1 or n only. We talk about M to N relationship. That means both of the two sides are multiple to multiple. We give a M to N relationship instead of a N to N relationship is simply because if we put an N to N relationship, that gives a hint that two values has to be the same, which is of course not true. And therefore, when we hitting multiple to multiple, we are specifying the M to N relationship to avoid some confusions. So when you put 1 over here, that means it can be 0 to 1. When you put N over there, that means it can be several. And therefore, both of them consist of 0, indicating that it is possible to be 0 or 1. How do we specify that 0 is there or not? We need to use the total and partial constraint. If we put a total, which means a double line, that means 0 is eliminated, which says that you have to have exactly 1. So that if we put two things combined together, double line and a 1 on the other side, that means everyone have to have exactly 1 participation here. If you put a partial, that means 0 can be existed. So that gives you an idea word in English as maybe or may have 1 participation. So the 0 stands over there. It's a little bit confusing, so let me help you to understand it perfectly. Come back to the examples that we keep using over here, saying that employee works for department. So you see, when we try to explain this relationship, we can simply write out employee works for department. Now let us try to explain, dive into the meanings here. Employee, since we have a double line over here, is the word of must. Employee must works for, because we have a one over here, it says that works for one department. On the other side, if we look into the department to employee, so department work by employee, so we will go from this direction back to the employee. Since we have a double line over here, and therefore we have a word of must. Employee must work by, since we have N over here, indicating several employees. So pretty straightforward. If we look into the other example, employee manage department. Since we have a single line over here that gives you a possibility of 0, which means that you don't participate over there, so that you have employee maybe manage, since we have a 1 over here that indicating one department. Of course, if you put an N over here, this whole sentence will become employee maybe manage several departments. If we look the other direction, department manages by employee, then we are saying department must manage by one employee. So that's saying every department has only one manager. It is time for us to give you some assignment. So this is the assignment that I want to give to you through this video. Describe the relationship constraints applied to the following ER diagram. So in this ER diagram, you see you have department and project. So I want you to explain to me just 2 sentences. What is the constraint provided in this information between department controls project on the other side, project controls by department? So give me the meaning of the ER diagram showed in here. I just need those 2 sentences, and then give me a complete definition of what this ER diagram talks about.